Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
Back at it again on a So Happy It's Tuesday, the BJ Show. I'm Brad, that's John. He is John Combest, JohnCombest.com. I spelled it, and you should be typing that into your computer, into your smartphone, your iPad, your pad, whatever you call it, your what do you call it? Discs?
Well, if you want free access to pads, go to a Minnesota bathroom, a boys' bathroom.
Here we go.
That's where you get the best free pads.
We're off already. That's John Combest. And if you check out his website, every single day he puts together a list of all the important stories going on in the state of Missouri. We start the show off by bringing this guy in.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
Now on with a countdown.
Counts them down. And we give John's top three, starting with...
In third place...
We'll start with a downer today, Brad. A St. Louis event that a lot of people in the barbecue community look forward to. Q and the Lou will not be coming to St. Louis next month. Did you see this headline, Brad?
Yeah, it's sort of weird. Talking about last-minute notice. It's like, what, 2 weeks from today, isn't it? Or
Yeah, it is sometime in September. I don't have the date in front of me right now. And in fact, to your point, Brad, just a month ago, this piece, by the way, is brought to us by Austin Hughley of the Post-Dispatch. And just a month ago, Tashara Jones and Greater St. Louis Inc., you know, that racket that does all kind of the do-gooder stuff and sits on a lot of money and whatever. They were promoting Q and the Lou and what a big deal it was going to be and how awesome it was going to be this year. And according to organizers, there was trouble garnering corporate sponsorship and VIP ticket sales, at least partially due to public safety concerns. So, Brad, it appears as though people do not believe this whole St. Louis Renaissance thing. I don't know if they have access to news or television or radio or social media and they see the crime. But for whatever reason, it looks like not everybody is bought into the St. Louis Renaissance thing.
Man, I tell you what. Now, what's sad about it is it's not this. I just looked it up. It's not this weekend. It's the weekend after next. So it's essentially, what, 10, 11 days from right now. They canceled the thing.
Yeah. So imagine having – and think of the effects. I know this sounds logistical and boring, but think if you were one of the rare corporate sponsors that wanted to dump money into this for your community, you know, for your community outreach efforts, or you're one of the pit masters that had planned on racking up all your barbecue stuff and coming to St. Louis. You know, think of the disappointment there. Think of what we oftentimes don't think of, Brad, is think of the carjacking industry and the theft industry and think of what could have been in terms of stolen valuables, stolen equipment, stuff you could have jacked off the lot. Excuse me for that phrase. Things you could have stolen off the lot at nighttime. So if you're a young criminal in St. Louis, think of the effect this could have on your September earnings, Brad. And a lot of those criminals are wrapping up their Q3 efforts. And if they had Q and the Lou on their Q3 targets, you know, they'll probably have to scramble that weekend to find something else.
Do they do quarterly calls in the whole bit? Do they do, well, last quarter
do. They do. And I sit in on some of them. I mostly just read the afterwards. With AI, a lot of times you can read the transcripts. But sometimes it's fun to try to hear them put together complete sentences. It sounds like a St. Louis Board of Aldermen meeting, actually. And there's a lot of – I was confused for a while because it seemed like a lot of them were into woodworking and forestry, but it turns out they were just saying, ask you a question.
Boy, John's hitting on all four cylinders this morning, all eight or however many's under the hood there. You know, I was really surprised when they gave the official well, like you said, that was the thing. They said corporate sponsors or lack thereof and fear of crime. I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't know. I mean, that's like the elephant in the room kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, you like whenever, I mean, today, you talk to people and so many people just won't go downtown because of the fact that they are afraid of becoming a victim of crime. Let's be honest with you. You know, that's the deal. I mean, and these guys just come out right and say it, right?
Yeah, and you know, one of the curious things that's in here too is one of the guys that originally put this together, kind of the godfather of this effort, was a guy named Brian Wahby. And if you recognize that name, Brad, he was for a long time head of the St. Louis City Democratic Central Committee. So he was the head of City Democrats. So think of kind of that mold of the Jane Duekers, of the people that have a little gray in their beard maybe, or in Jane's case, I mean, I haven't seen her hair. Maybe she's got a little gray in her hair. But you think of the people who have been around for a little while in city and county Democratic politics, who are progressive, but who actually believe in law and order. And when people like the Wahbys of the world acknowledge reality, and Jane Dueker has now acknowledged reality for a long time of the fact that a lot of folks in the Democratic Party have this whole defund the police nonsense. And, it says something about the fact that what we might have considered progressive people 20 years ago seems so sensible today.
The times they be a-changing. Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Well, some good news, Brad, after we started with a downer, some good news for folks who live in rural Missouri. And that is that the U.S. Postal Service has a new plan to deliver mail. Now, the good news is if you're in rural Missouri, you might feel like you're getting your mail a little too quickly. And the U.S. Postal Service has come out and said that they're going to slow down deliveries for people in rural America, particularly, Brad, people who live more than 50 miles away from a mail processing facility. So it might not even technically be a rural area. It might just be a suburban area, depending on your location. And Brad, this is a small sacrifice to pay, according to the Postal Service report, to improve the U.S. Postal Service reduction of carbon emissions. There's no point in making these inefficient trips here and there all the time, Brad. And if we want to improve our environmental sustainability, and if the U.S. Postal Service wants to improve its carbon emissions and reinforce its commitment to environmental sustainability, that was the quote, people in rural America are just going to have to wait a little bit while for their mail. Now, to be fair, Brad, I want to be clear the fact that I didn't read this whole Postal Service report. I have a link up to the Missouri Net story. This was brought to us by Marshall Griffin of Missouri Net. So I have it up on my website today. But yeah, Brad, I think we could all agree that we're all getting our mail a little bit too quickly, and the Postal Service just needs to slow down.
Well, now hold on a minute. So in other words, they're not going to change the metro delivery, but it's just going to be like you say, the 50-mile and in this case, I would guess that would be like the Montgomery cities of the world. I'm trying to think that would be west
the
of
high
70.
hills, the area like that. Now they do say, let me point out too, that in fairness, it says it would specifically speed up mail delivery for those who live within 50 miles of the Postal Service's largest processing centers.
Okay.
So I don't know, and maybe in the report they detail which ones are considered the biggest ones.
The crazy thing about this is there was a time, and even in some of the close-in munis, the suburban munis, let's take, for example, I know is Washington, Missouri. Back in the day, and not that many years ago, let's say maybe 15, 20 years ago, when you went into the Washington post office, there were 2 mail slots if you dumped your mail, and one was local, Washington, the other was out of town, okay? And when you dumped your mail into the local, if you were mailing something across town within Washington, Missouri, you put it in the local slot, the 63090 slot, and they processed it right there in the back office, and the next morning it went out for delivery right in that area. Okay, then the Postal Service came up with this new system where everything goes through the processing centers. So, and this is the crazy thing for me. They talk about the carbon footprint. They take all the mail that goes into the Washington post office, and let's say a lot of it's coming back to Washington. They put it in a truck. It drives downtown. They sort it downtown. Then it goes back out to Washington. Now, explain that, and that's the way. Matter of fact, I told this story last week about a piece of equipment that I purchased from a company in Springfield, Illinois. Not even Springfield, Missouri, Springfield, Illinois, which is much closer to St. Louis than Springfield, Missouri. And I had the guy send the guy a cashier's check, and so I sent it on a Tuesday, and I sent it priority mail, and they said in a little envelope, the whole bit. And it's supposed to be there on Thursday. It got there the following Tuesday. So it took a week, actually 8 days if you look at it that way, because the Monday would have been day 7, Tuesday would have been day 8. 8 days, I paid $8.98 for that, And the guy in Springfield told me, he says, this happens all the time, where our mail, he says, and this was the case. What happened with my particular package, or this payment I sent, because I had tracking on it. I took it on, I think it was the 13th, which was a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I guess it was 2 weeks ago today. And it sat in St. Louis for 2 days. Then it went to Springfield. Then it came back to St. Louis. Then it went to Springfield again. And then they finally delivered it. Now, explain to me how they're not, why they're, if there's this carbon, carbon content, whatever garbage, aren't they sort of operating inefficiently right now? I mean, if they're doing...
I think so. And I mean, so first of all, I think that shows the inefficiency. The real takeaway from this story is that you used to have 2 slots in Washington that you'd visit one or the other depending on your mood that day. And also it takes a little bit longer for your package to deliver these days, Brad.
I just don't understand. I mean, I told you, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They took all the mailboxes out in Clayton. Used to be that was a big deal, where the drive-through mailboxes, they had like 3 or 4 of them, and quite busy at the Clayton post office. They're gone. So if you want to mail a letter, you got to get out of your car now. And the crazy part of it is you now have to park. And you can't park in the parking lot, because I told this story before, because all the vans, the new vans they bought won't fit in the new garage, won't fit in the old garage because they're too tall. And you can't find a parking space there on Maryland Avenue because of the fact that they've narrowed Maryland to 2 lanes, which used to be 4 lanes, because they have the bike lanes now, which nobody goes in. Man, I tell you what. And last but not least,
the number one.
A dangerous man. That's right, Josh Hawley. Now, Brad, we know that the height of his danger took place on January 6th, which was a dark, dark day for democracy, that time that he raised his fist up to the crowd. We know that that was dangerous, and we know that that was inciting a mob attack on the Capitol. But the Kansas City Star has a piece today. Daniel DeRochers from the Kansas City Star, to be more specific, has a piece that's even more dangerous to democracy. Josh Hawley, you'll recall, has been one of the many Republicans going around talking about how Democrats rigged Kamala Harris's nomination to be the Democratic leader on the November ticket. So this reporter, Daniel DeRochers, was able to speak to an elections expert from a liberal group called the Brennancenter for Justice. And this gentleman, by the way, Brad, his name is Daniel Weiner. So Mr. Weiner says, it appears to be an attempt to transform what was admittedly an unusual situation with a presumptive nominee stepping aside into something nefarious, when in fact the entire process from start to finish has been completely lawful. So here we go, Brad. Josh Hawley, by talking about the fact, using words like rigged to describe the Democratic nomination process, is undermining the fabric of our society, which is our democracy, Brad. Now, I don't know how Josh Hawley looks at himself in the mirror at night. After he looks at himself in the mirror in the morning, because it's like you see that hair and it's just too perfectly coiffed. But at night, I don't know how he looks at himself in the mirror, knowing that he's undermining democracy by using the word rigged. And Mr. DeRochers, the reporter, also gets a quote from a guy named David Becker, who leads something called the Center for Executive Innovation and Research, and says,
these are claims based on a fundamental lie. And that's why that's problematic.
Problematic, Brad, if you're not familiar, is the Gen Z word. You know how people talked about, would say things like triggered and canceled and offensive. That's offensive. Problematic is the word for 2024 if you're describing something you don't like but don't have a very specific argument to it. So anyway, Brad, to sum it up, Josh Hawley needs to stop using the word rigged. I should also point out, too, in fairness, that this gentleman from the Brennan Center for Justice, Mr. Weiner, and to give him credit, he has been a long-term advocate for the rights. He does a lot of pro bono work for the LGBTQ rights for a law firm called Jenner and Block when he was there. So he did a lot of pro bono work there. So we should give him credit for being a leader in the LGBTQIA plus asterisk community.
Is he an attorney?
He is an attorney, yeah, at the Brennancenter of Justice.
Okay. Couple things there. First off, let's be honest. This whole thing is sort of malodorous. How's that? Is that a good term?
Yeah.
And I guess the interesting thing for me is, if you go back, and you don't have to go back that many weeks, let's go back 10, 12 weeks. What was the big story after the debate flop from our president, Mr. Biden, when everybody was in a tizzy? Oh my God, this guy's terrible. We can't have him. He's going to get beat by Trump. So the big controversy was, well, we can't have Kamala Harris because of the fact that nobody would vote for her. We have to look at Gretchen Whitmer or the various people. And now to the point where it's like, okay, what happened to all that talk? That's gone. And then now the interesting thing is, did you by any chance hear about this interview with Quentin Tarantino on Bill Maher's show? Have you heard this?
No. What did he have to say?
Well, he's essentially saying he F-bombed the hell out of the show, but essentially he's saying, yeah, keep Kamala under wraps, because you know what? She sucks at interviews. She's terrible. And essentially he's saying any effing way to win. Doesn't matter what we do, any effing way to win. And he's essentially saying that she shouldn't grant any interviews. She shouldn't tell anybody what her policies are.
Yeah.
We just need to win. And I'm going like, oh my God. And the sad part of it is now they're having this debate over the debates. Did you hear this? We had at the top of our newscast about the microphone deal. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, about when they're going to be muted or not?
Well, the crazy thing is, not that I'm siding with Trump, but Trump agreed to the rules of the debate with Biden. Now that Kamala Harris is the person, they want to change the rules. Not Trump, but the Biden people or the Harris people want to change the rules. I'm going like, okay, I'm starting with Trump on this. Okay, if these were the rules that I agreed to under the Biden debate, we should just carry them forward with the person who replaced Joe Biden, right? Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, that would make perfect sense, yeah.
But no. Now, why? I'm going to ask you a question. Why would she not want to have the mics muted? Is she going to interrupt him? Is she going to say, well, Mr. Trump, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a scumbag. You're a convicted felon. Is she just going to, she's going to do that to him?
I'm guessing maybe she feels as though that whole, her whole boss girl, I'm tough. You won't talk over me. Like maybe she feels like she could be good at interrupting. Like there's clearly a reason for that.
The interesting part of this is the debates are so phony to begin with. What they should do is they should put both of them on stage and have the moderators say, okay, I'm Joe Smo, and I'm here from, XYZ Radio, and you know what? This is Kamala Harris, who's running for president. She's currently the vice president. This is Donald Trump. He used to be the president of the United States. He's running to become the president again. Okay, have at it. Just let him go at it. You know what I mean?
Well, now here's the thing, Brad, and I think you're probably going to hear from some angry cat ladies after this show. But I think that would encourage, because of the way that we encourage men to talk over women, I think that would be a pretty misogynist and sexist way to do it, because it's proven that men are more likely to interrupt women than the opposite, whether you're in a corporate setting or in a personal setting. There's been a lot of research on this. So I think that your suggestion there, Brad, is horribly misogynist.
Well, no, because here's what I would do. I would essentially say to Mr. Trump, as his advisor, I'd say, okay, everybody expects you to be Mr. MCP and you're going to talk all over her the whole bit. Here's what you do. You don't talk. You just stand there and let her talk.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of been the joke about Kamala Harris, right? Just let her keep going on, let her keep creating word salads.
Right, just let her talk, and she talks herself to a corner, and he'll just sit there and nod, and yeah.
Hey, the thing that I do love when you comment on this, Brad, is when you look back at what you have said about Biden and what you have said about Trump and what you are saying about Kamala Harris, you are unencumbered by what has been.
And don't get me going about the fact that my complaint, the deal was Joe Biden a week ago yesterday went to the DNC. They had him on at midnight or something like that.
Yeah, they buried him.
That was his farewell address. Then he goes on vacation. He comes back. He's on vacation all week long. He comes back, what was it, Sunday or yesterday, and does the ceremony at the Arlington National Cemetery for the 13 service members who were killed in Afghanistan. He leaves and he goes back to Delaware. He's on vacation all this week. When does the guy work? And you're talking to a guy who is very frustrated by the fact that it bothers me to see people, hey, we only need a 4-day work week. It's just like we play it here as a filler on this station on Egbert. Gary V, who comes out and essentially compares the United States currently to the Roman Empire, and we are and I hate to say this, we're in decline because we've gotten soft. That's what he said. We've gotten soft. Things have gotten so easy. Nobody wants to go to work anymore after they want to work from their house because of the COVID thing. Nobody wants to, nobody wants to do various jobs. Matter of fact, on Armstrong and Getty the other morning, they were talking about Jack Armstrong was talking about the fact that he moved, and the moving company that moved him was a bunch of Russian guys, and he talked to the owner of the company, and they said the reason because they can't find any American people that want to work anymore, so they have to hire always these immigrants. Man, it bothers me. It bothers me to see what's happened. And is it just me that sees this kind of stuff, or am I just the only weirdo that looks at this stuff?
I don't think you're a weirdo at all. First of all, remember when Mark McCluskey said, there are no weird questions, only weird people who ask them, Brad.
That's me.
And I think he was talking about you.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's really common because of how hard you worked your entire life, Brad, from being a curb boy at Steak and Shake all the way up to the modern day. It's hard for you to let go of that work ethic and realize that the world has changed. So when you see people embracing the reality of a 4-day work week, whether you're a teacher or you're a corporate office, I know people today that I used to work with that are mourning today, MOURNING, because Tuesday is the day during the week that they need to go into the office for between 3 and 4 hours before they come home. Now that affects their laundry, that affects their gym schedule, it affects when they're going to get their nails done. It even affects, for some of them, when they're going to get their hair colored this week because they have to be in the office between 3 and 4 hours on a Tuesday. So that's the reality, Brad, and you and I aren't going to change it. And the more that we resist it and complain about it, the more that it underscores our angst.
Okay, John. Let me get my razor blade sharpened up and let me get my wrist ready. Okay.
And you don't have to, Brad, you don't have to accept it. And the option is to do what you're doing, which is to complain about it and point out how it was different in your day and repeat that day after day to a generation that doesn't care and doesn't want to hear it and says, good night, Grandpa.
But, John, Gary V talks about the fact, and once again,
Gary V's 50. Get him out of here. He's got gray hair. Who cares?
I have to find this thing he talks about. He talks about the fact that this is what happens to societies when they go into essentially decline. Is everybody just?
I know. We easy times create weak men create bad times create strong men create good times. We've discussed this at length on the show. Brad, it's the cycle of life. I might not think that a 4-day work week is optimal, but other people do, and we can just beat our heads against the wall, or we can accept the way that it's going to be.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?